The summer of 1481 draped Florence in a golden haze, the air thick with the scent of sun-warmed stone and the faint tang of the Arno River, its sluggish waters glinting like molten bronze beneath the Ponte Santa Trinita. I, Jonah, wove through the bustling Oltarno district, my boots clicking on the uneven cobblestones as I navigated streets alive with the clamor of life. Hawkers bellowed the virtues of their wares: fresh figs, wheels of pecorino, bolts of silk dyed in hues of saffron and indigo, while apprentices darted through the crowds, their tunics stained with sweat and paint. Above, the city's marble facades gleamed, their surfaces carved with the elegance of a new age, and the distant dome of the Duomo loomed like a sentinel, its terracotta curve catching the last rays of daylight. I had come to Florence years ago from the rugged Tuscan hills, where the wind sang through olive groves, and my father, a stern goatherd, taught me little beyond survival. Drawn by whispers of enlightenment, I sought a city where ideas bloomed like the roses in the Medici gardens, a place where a man of my intellect could carve his own path. Self-taught through sleepless nights hunched over stolen manuscripts, Galen's treatises, Arabic texts on optics, even heretical musings on the body's inner workings, I had become a scholar of anatomy and natural philosophy. By day, I earned my keep as a cartographer, my maps guiding merchants along trade routes to Venice or Milan, their precision earning me coin and quiet respect. But my true passion lay in unraveling the patterns of existence, the hidden mechanics of flesh and soul. I prided myself on my charm, my ability to draw secrets from anyone, be it a beggar muttering prophecies in the Piazza della Signoria or a banker boasting overwatered wine in a smoky tavern. My mind was a labyrinth, each conversation a thread I wove into a tapestry of understanding, my smile a key to unlock trust. Yet Florence, for all its splendor, simmered with unease that summer. A shadow had crept over the city, darker than the plague-ridden winters of decades past. Prominent men, counselors with waxen faces, minor nobles draped in the Medici's favor, even a Sforza cousin visiting from Milan had vanished into the night. Days or weeks later, their remains would surface, in the shadowed arches beneath the Ponte Vecchio or tangled in the reeds along the Arno's banks. The bodies were not merely dead, but transformed, carved with a precision that chilled even the city's hardened gravediggers. Limbs severed with surgical care, torsos opened to reveal glistening organs arranged in patterns some whispered were profane, a mockery of sacred art, perhaps, or a message no one dared decipher. The people called the culprit Il Macellaio Fantasma, the phantom butcher, and fear clung to the city like damp rot. Guards in crimson cloaks doubled their patrols, their halberds glinting under torchlight, while priests in Santa Croce preached of demons loosed upon a sinful world. In the markets, women clutched rosaries, and men spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting to the lengthening shadows.
I listened to these tales in the taverns, my face a mask of concern as I sipped tart Chianti, the wooden cup rough against my lips. Inwardly, I felt a quiet thrill, a certainty that the world was being cleansed, one cut at a time. The highborn, those sadistic royals and their sycophants who hoarded power and crushed the poor beneath their velvet heels, were the true blight on Italy. From their marble palaces they wove webs of cruelty, their smiles as sharp as daggers. If their kind were culled, might not Florence's soul shine brighter? I kept such thoughts buried deep, my outward demeanor one of thoughtful curiosity, a man too refined to revel in gossip, yet too engaged to ignore it. It was on one such evening, as the sun bled crimson behind the Duomo's dome, that I first met Leonardo da Vinci. I had heard of him, of course. Florence buzzed with tales of the bastard son of a notary, now nearing 30, whose talents defied category. Painter, engineer, dreamer of impossible machines, he was said to be crafting a new masterpiece, an altarpiece for the monks of San Donato Escopeto, the adoration of the Magi, a work to rival the ancients. I found him in a cramped workshop off the Via dei Servi, its air heavy with the scent of linseed oil and charcoal dust. The room was a chaos of genius: parchment sketches pinned to walls, wooden models of winged contraptions teetering on tables, and half-finished canvases glowing in the flicker of tallow candles. Leonardo stood at a slanted desk, his linen shirt smeared with ochre, his fingers smudged with ink as he sketched a horse's flank with furious strokes.
"Maestro," I called softly, stepping over a clutter of gears and paint pots, my voice warm but measured. "Forgive the intrusion, but that design there," I gestured to a parchment where a strange bladed mechanism spiraled, "it recalls Archimedes' screw, yet reimagined for the air. A bold leap. Does it dream of flight?" He turned, his eyes sharp as a falcon's beneath a tangle of chestnut hair, his beard flecked with crimson pigment. For a moment, suspicion clouded his gaze. Artists guarded their sanctums fiercely, but my words had struck a chord. "You know Archimedes beyond his baths and levers?" he asked, his voice low, testing. "Few do. And you're right, the blades are meant to catch the wind, perhaps to lift a man. But tell me, stranger, how does a passerby read such intent in a glance?" I smiled, my expression one of easy confidence, and leaned against a workbench, careful not to disturb a vial of verdigris. "Jonah, at your service," I said, bowing slightly, my dark cloak catching the candlelight. "I've studied the ancients in stolen hours, mapping not just lands but the laws of nature. Your work, maestro, weaves the divine and the mechanical in a way that stirs the soul. Might I linger a while? I seek only to learn, not to impose." Leonardo's lips twitched into a smile, his wariness melting into curiosity. "Flattery from a man who cites Archimedes, rare indeed. Sit, Jonah, if you can find a chair beneath this mess. I'm wrestling with this adoration. The Magi must radiate awe, yet the Christ child anchors their gaze. It's a dance of perspective and passion, and I'm yet to master it." From that night, our friendship took root, nourished by shared evenings in his workshop. I brought small offerings, a dog-eared volume on optics bartered from a Venetian trader, quills I'd sharpened to needle points, or a basket of ripe persimmons from the market. We spoke for hours, our voices rising over the clatter of distant carts and the cries of night watchmen. Leonardo shared his visions: machines to soar like birds, canals to tame rivers, even war engines to end battles swiftly. I countered with insights from my studies, suggesting how the sinews of a horse might inform his sketches, or how light bends through glass to deepen his painting's glow. "The body is a machine," I'd say, tracing a finger over his anatomical drawings, their inclines mapping muscle and bone. "A divine contraption, waiting for us to unlock its secrets." He nodded, his own obsession with dissection mirroring my private pursuits, though I never spoke of the chambers beneath my lodgings, where candlelight danced on sharper tools. As autumn painted Florence in amber and rust, the city's terror grew. Another body was found near the Ponte Vecchio, a Medici advisor, his corpulent frame sliced open, his heart placed atop his chest like an offering. The cuts were meticulous, almost reverent, and some whispered the scene echoed the Last Supper's composition, a blasphemy that sent shudders through the clergy. In the Piazza della Signoria, crowds gathered, their faces pale as they demanded justice from the Signoria's stone walls. Over a flagon of wine in Leonardo's workshop, the firelight casting shadows on his half-finished adoration, we spoke of the horrors. "It's monstrous," Leonardo said, his voice heavy as he stared at a sketch where the Magi's hands reached toward a radiant child. "What drives such precision and cruelty? Is it hatred for the powerful, or a mind unmoored?" I swirled my wine, the ruby liquid catching the glow of the hearth, my face a study in thoughtful sorrow. "Perhaps it's a twisted quest for justice," I mused, my tone soft, probing. "The highborn, those royals and their courtiers across Italy, they wield power like a scourge, crushing the weak in their shadow. If someone believes they're purging that corruption, might madness and righteousness blur? But come, Leonardo, let's speak of brighter things. Your flying machine, could it truly cross the Arno?" His eyes lit up, and he launched into a cascade of ideas, his hands sketching invisible wings in the air. I listened, my heart warmed by his brilliance, a man untainted by the rot I sought to excise. Our bond grew, a beacon in Florence's fearful nights, as I moved through the city's pulse, ever the scholar, ever the shadow, my true work hidden beneath a mask of intellect and charm. The city of Florence pulsed with the fever of the Renaissance in the sweltering summer of 1481, its streets a tapestry of ambition and artistry woven beneath a sky of unrelenting blue. The air carried the mingled scents of fresh-baked pane toscano from bakers' ovens, the sharp musk of tanners' vats along the Arno's banks, and the sweet decay of overripe fruit trampled in the markets.
In the Piazza della Signoria, sculptors chipped at marble under makeshift awnings, their hammers ringing like bells, while scholars in black robes debated Plato's virtues in the shade of lodges. Painters, their fingers stained with ultramarine and vermilion, bartered for patronage outside the Palazzo Vecchio, where the Medici's influence hung as heavy as the tapestries adorning its halls. Yet, beneath this vibrant surface, a shadow had settled over Florence that year, cold and insidious, creeping through the city like ink spreading across parchment. Whispers of dread slithered through the markets, as contagious as the plague that had ravaged these streets decades before. Prominent figures, counselors with florid faces and fur-trimmed cloaks, minor nobles entwined in the Medici's intricate web of power, even a haughty Sforza cousin from Milan, his velvet doublet embroidered with silver thread, had vanished without a trace. Days or weeks later, their remains would emerge from the city's underbelly. A merchant prince's arm found dangling from a butcher's hook in a shadowed alley off the Via Calamala. A diplomat's torso, split open with uncanny precision, bobbing among the Arno's reeds, its organs glinting wetly in the dawn. The cuts were clean, almost reverent, as if the blade had been guided by a scholar's hand rather than a madman's. Torsos were splayed like manuscripts, revealing the glistening secrets of sinew and bone, arranged in patterns that some whispered mimicked the sacred geometries of cathedral rose windows, profane parodies of divine order. The people dubbed the unseen killer Il Macellaio Fantasma, the phantom butcher, a demon born of nightmares who haunted the fog-draped nights. In the Osterian taverns, where candlelight flickered on rough-hewn beams, and the air was thick with the tang of spilled wine and roasted chestnut, fear laced every conversation. I sat at a scarred oak table in a tavern near the Bargello, my fingers tracing the grain of a wooden cup as I listened to the tales. A cooper, his apron dusted with sawdust, spoke in hushed tones of a counselor found in the cloisters of Santa Maria Novella, his ribs pried apart like a reliquary, his heart missing. A washerwoman, her hands red from lye, swore she'd seen a cloaked figure slip into the river's mist the night the Sforza noble disappeared. "It's God's wrath," an old friar muttered, clutching his rosary, his voice trembling as he drained his cup. "Or the devil's art." The city's guards, their crimson cloaks stark against the moonlit stones, patrolled with new vigor, their halberds catching the torchlight as they swept through the piazzas. Churches brimmed with the desperate, their prayers rising like smoke in Santa Croce and San Lorenzo, where priests in brocaded vestments thundered sermons of repentance to ward off the unseen terror. I nodded gravely, my dark eyes reflecting the candle's glow, my expression one of shared concern. My cloak, a deep green wool edged with modest embroidery, marked me as a man of learning, but not excess, a cartographer perhaps, or a scholar of natural philosophy, as I let others assume. Inwardly, my heart thrummed with a quiet satisfaction, a certainty that justice, in its purest form, was being carved into the city's corrupt flesh. The elite, those sadistic royals and their courtiers who lounged in palaces of veined marble and sipped wine from Venetian glass, while the poor starved in the Oltarno's slums, were the true predators. I had seen their cruelty firsthand, a Medici ally who bankrupted tenant farmers with a smile, a noble who flogged a servant for a spilled goblet, their laughter as cold as the Arno in winter. They cloaked their sadism in silk and gold, their power a blade wielded against the weak. To excise such vermin, to strip away their gilded masks and reveal the rot beneath, was to purify Florence's soul, to restore balance to a city teetering on the edge of decadence. If only others could see the necessity of such cleansing, the elegance of a blade that spoke truth where words failed,
Yet I kept these thoughts locked deep within, my face a study in thoughtful restraint as I sipped my Chianti, its tartness sharp on my tongue. To the tavern's patrons, I was Jonah, the charming wanderer who spun tales of distant lands and debated the stars' motions with a wit that disarmed. None suspected the fire that burned beneath my calm, nor the chambers beneath my lodgings, where tools gleamed in the dark, waiting to sculpt a new order from the chaos of privilege. As the months of 1481 slipped by, autumn's amber light fading into the chill of early winter, the terror that gripped Florence deepened, coiling around the city like a serpent in the night. The vibrant pulse of the Renaissance, its sculptors chiseling marble in the Piazza della Signoria, its poets reciting verses in torchlit courtyards, faltered under a pall of dread that seeped into every corner of the city. The Arno River, its waters now a cold, slate-gray mirror, seemed to carry the weight of unspoken horrors, its currents whispering of the atrocities that surfaced along its banks. The latest outrage had been discovered at dawn near the Ponte Vecchio, where merchant stalls stood shuttered in fear. The body of Messer Antonio da Pistoia, a wealthy advisor to Lorenzo the Medici, lay sprawled in a shadowed alcove beneath the bridge's arches. His corpulent form had been dissected with surgical precision, the cuts so clean they gleamed in the morning mist. His organs, heart, liver, lungs, arranged in a grotesque tableau around him, their glistening surfaces catching the first light like offerings on a profane altar. Some whispered, in voices trembling with horror, that the arrangement mocked the Last Supper, the organs positioned like apostles around a Christless table, a blasphemy that sent shudders through the devout. The news spread like wildfire through the city, igniting panic in the markets and dread in the hearts of even the boldest bravos. In the Piazza della Signoria, crowds gathered beneath the stern gaze of the Palazzo Vecchio's crenellated tower, their faces pale as the marble statues that loomed nearby.
Men in woolen tunics, their hands calloused from labor, clutched knives and muttered of vigilante justice, while women in shawls, their eyes red from sleepless nights, pressed rosaries to their lips, praying for deliverance from Il Macellaio Fantasma, the phantom butcher. The air was thick with the acrid scent of fear, sweat, spilled wine, and the faint metallic tang of blood that seemed to linger in the imagination. Guards in crimson cloaks, their halberds glinting under flickering torches, pushed through the throng, their shouts drowned by the clamor of voices demanding action from the signoria. "How many more?" a baker bellowed, his flour-dusted hands raised to the sky. "The Medici protect their own, but who protects us?" A young mother, clutching a swaddled infant, wept openly, her voice breaking as she spoke of bolts locked tight each night, of footsteps heard in the alleys after curfew. The churches overflowed, their stone naves echoing with desperate prayers. In Santa Croce, a friar's sermon trembled with warnings of divine retribution, his words punctuated by the sobs of the congregation. That evening, I sat with Leonardo in his workshop off the Via dei Servi, the air heavy with the scent of linseed oil, turpentine, and the faint, musty odor of old parchment stacked in teetering piles. The room was a chaos of creation, its stone walls stained with smoke from guttering candles, their wax pooling on the floorboards like frozen tears. A half-finished panel of the Adoration of the Magi leaned against a wall, its figures, kings and shepherds, caught in a swirl of ethereal wonder, glowing faintly in the candlelight, their faces twisted in expressions that now seemed to mirror the city's anguish. Outside, the wind rattled the wooden shutters, carrying the distant wail of a mourner and the clatter of a night watchman's boots on cobblestones. Leonardo poured us wine from a clay jug, its ruby liquid catching the flicker of the flames, and handed me a wooden cup, its surface worn smooth by years of use. His hands, usually steady, trembled slightly, betraying the unease that gnawed at him. "It's barbaric," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes fixed on the panel where the Magi's faces seemed to pulse with life, their awe now tinged with a shadow of fear that mirrored his own. He ran a hand through his unruly hair, the chestnut curls streaked with gray from sleepless nights, and his beard, flecked with paint, quivered as he spoke. What drives a man to such acts, Jonah? To carve a body like a sculptor shapes clay, to arrange it in mockery of sacred things? Is it vengeance against the powerful, or mere lunacy? His gaze flicked to the window, where the darkness pressed against the panes like a living thing, and I saw the flicker of dread in his eyes, a rare crack in the armor of a man who dreamed of conquering the skies. I've seen death, studied it in secret to understand the body's workings, but this? This is a violation. The city is bleeding, and I fear it will not stop. I sipped my wine, the tart Chianti biting my tongue like a warning, its warmth spreading through me as I sat in Leonardo's workshop, the air thick with the cloying scent of linseed oil and the faint, acrid tang of smoldering tallow from candles that flickered like nervous heartbeats. My expression was a carefully crafted mask of thoughtful concern, my dark eyes reflecting the golden glow of the flames, steady and serene as I leaned forward, elbows resting on a scarred oak table cluttered with sketches and half-empty vials of pigment. Outside, the Via dei Servi was shrouded in the chill of a late autumn night, the wind rattling the workshop's wooden shutters and carrying the distant, mournful toll of bells from San Lorenzo, where masses for the dead had become a nightly ritual. The city of Florence, once ablaze with the Renaissance's fervor, now cowered beneath a suffocating veil of terror, its streets haunted by the specter of Il Macellaio Fantasma, the phantom butcher, whose latest atrocity, a Medici advisor carved into a blasphemous parody of the Last Supper beneath the Ponte Vecchio, had left the city reeling. The horror clung to the air like damp rot, seeping into every whispered conversation, every wary glance exchanged in the torchlit piazzas. "Perhaps it's a misguided quest for purity, Leonardo," I said, my voice soft and measured, each word chosen with the precision of a blade's edge. I tilted my head, letting a lock of dark hair fall across my brow, enhancing the image of a scholar wrestling with the world's darkness. The highborn, those sadistic royals in their ilk across Italy, the Medici's gilded courtiers, they wield power like a blade, cutting down the innocent with a smile. They feast in their palaces while the poor starve in the Oltarno's mud, their cruelty cloaked in silk and gold. If someone believes they're cleansing the rot from Florence's soul, carving away the corruption that festers in those marble halls, well, madness and righteousness can blur into one. I paused, meeting his eyes with a steady gaze, my expression one of shared sorrow, though inwardly my heart thrummed with a quiet exultation. The elite were the true monsters, their hands stained with the blood of the powerless, their laughter echoing through Florence's slums. To strip them bare, to lay open their hypocrisy with a surgeon's precision, was to sculpt a purer world, a truth I kept locked behind the warm smile I offered Leonardo. His face, usually alight with the spark of creation, was drawn and pale, the candlelight casting deep shadows in the hollows of his cheeks. His eyes, normally sharp as a hawk's, were clouded with a fear that trembled beneath his words, a vulnerability I noted with a flicker of fascination. He clutched his wooden cup so tightly his knuckles whitened, the wine within sloshing softly, and his gaze darted to the workshop's door, as if expecting the butcher himself to emerge from the darkness. "It's not righteousness, Jonah," he said, his voice low and unsteady, barely rising above the crackle of the hearth fire. "It's unholy. To dissect a man like a beast, to arrange his remains in mockery of sacred art, it's a desecration of the body's divine design. I've studied corpses in secret, yes, to learn the muscles weave, the heart's chambers, but this," he shuddered, his beard quivering, flecked with crimson paint that now seemed a cruel echo of the bloodshed outside. "This is a darkness that chills the soul. Florence is unraveling, and I fear we're all marked by it." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of a city teetering on the edge of panic, where every shadow held a blade, every footstep a threat. As the candle flickered lower, casting elongated shadows across the workshop's cluttered tables, Leonardo's enthusiasm waned, his sketches forgotten as exhaustion claimed him.
He rose, stretching his lithe frame, the faint scent of linseed oil and charcoal clinging to his sleeves. "It's late, Jonah," he murmured, his eyes heavy with the day's burdens. "The streets grow unsafe after dark. You should stay. The butcher's shadow looms too close these nights." I nodded, feigning reluctance, my fingers tracing the rim of my empty cup. "Perhaps you're right, my friend. The fog rolls in thick from the Arno, hiding all manner of sins." We shared a quiet laugh, the sound hollow in the vast room, and he led me to a small alcove where a pallet of straw and wool awaited, a simple bed for weary visitors. As he bid me good night, retreating to his own chambers above, I watched him go, the door creaking shut behind him like a final breath. The workshop fell silent, save for the distant toll of Santa Maria del Fiore's bells marking the hour. I lay there in the dimness, my mind not on rest, but on the city's pulse, throbbing with the fear I had sown. The elite of Florence, those bloated merchants and scheming nobles, had long poisoned this cradle of art and intellect with their greed, their whispered deals in shadowed palazzos, their hands dripping with the blood of the common folk they crushed underfoot. Messer Antonio, that corpulent banker with his ledgers stained by usury, had been the latest. His screams had echoed in the narrow alley off the Ponte Vecchio, muffled by the river's rush. I remembered the precision of my blade, a surgeon's tool honed in the quiet hours of study, parting flesh with the same delicacy Leonardo applied to his canvases. The organs arranged in that mocking circle, not madness, but message. A heart at the center, symbol of their corrupted souls, encircled by the viscera of their excesses. But tonight the hunger stirred anew, not for just any victim, but for one whose fall would echo through the halls of power. I rose silently, my cloak whispering against the stone floor as I slipped into the shadows. The workshop held treasures beyond measure, Leonardo's tools, scattered like forgotten dreams. My eyes fell upon a small chest in the corner, one he had shown me weeks ago, filled with anatomical sketches, forbidden knowledge gleaned from midnight dissections in the crypts of Santo Spirito. The organs arranged in that mocking circle, not madness, but message. A heart at the center, symbol of their corrupted souls, encircled by the viscera of their excesses. But tonight the hunger stirred anew, not for just any victim, but for one whose fall would echo through the halls of power. I rose silently, my cloak whispering against the stone floor as I slipped into the shadows. The workshop held treasures beyond measure, Leonardo's tools, scattered like forgotten dreams. My eyes fell upon a small chest in the corner, one he had shown me weeks ago, filled with anatomical sketches, forbidden knowledge gleaned from midnight dissections in the crypts of Santo Spirito. Among them, a set of fine scalpels, their edges gleaming like accusations in the moonlight filtering through the shuttered window. I selected one, its handle fitting my palm as if crafted for me, and tucked it into my sleeve. The city awaited, its fears my canvas. Slipping out through a side door into the mist-shrouded alley, I moved like a specter, the fog coiling around my ankles. The streets were empty now, the patrols thinned by the hour, their torches distant flickers. I made my way toward the Palazzo Pitti, where Ser Giovanni, that simpering advisor to the Medici, slumbered in his opulent bed, oblivious to the judgment descending. The entry was simple, a loose grate in the outer wall, known to me from earlier reconnaissance, disguised as scholarly visits. Inside, the halls were a labyrinth of marble and tapestry, but I navigated them with the ease of one who had mapped them in his mind. His chamber door yielded to a gentle push, oiled hinges betraying no sound. There he lay, his chest rising and falling in the glow of a dying fire, his nightcap askew, a goblet of unfinished wine on the bedside table, laced, perhaps, with the opiates he favored to dull his conscience. I approached, the scalpel a cold extension of my will. His eyes fluttered open at the last moment, widening in recognition. "Jonah? What?" The blade silenced him, a swift arc across the throat, blood blooming like ink on parchment. He gurgled, clutching at the wound, but I was methodical, efficient. The work that followed was artistry in its own right, incisions precise, organs extracted with care, arranged on the velvet bedspread in a spiral this time, a nod to Leonardo's fascination with the golden ratio, a profane tribute to the genius who unknowingly inspired my tools. His heart, still warm, placed at the vortex, a symbol of the rot at Florence's core. As dawn crept over the rooftops, I returned to the workshop, slipping back into the alcove unseen. The scalpel, cleaned in a basin of water meant for mixing pigments, returned to its chest. Leonardo stirred above, unaware, our bond unbroken. I lay there, feigning sleep, my heart steady as the city awoke to fresh screams. The butcher had struck again, they would say, his identity a whisper lost in the fog. But in the quiet recesses of my mind, I knew the truth. I was the architect of their terror, the unseen hand carving purity from corruption, one crimson stroke at a time.